P. Messager. I'm a doula, antenatal and postnatal educator in Cambridge, UK. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about how you can use a rebozo shawl to support yourself during pregnancy, during labor and birth, during the postnatal period and beyond, because I really truly believe it's a tool you can use for yourself and your family and throughout your whole life. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, this is a rebozo. A rebozo is a traditional Mexican shawl. They come in all sorts of shapes and size. So the one I have on my shoulder is a simple cotton one, and I have a beautiful rainbow rebozo from Guatemala here. And I have another beautiful cotton rebozo from Mexico here. This one, which is actually referred to as a manta, is a shawl from Ecuador. So really, we call it a rebozo in the birth field because that's how it became famous, is how people in the birth field learned to use it through traditional midwifery technique passed on by traditional midwives. But what my quest of knowledge has led me to find out is that all around the world, traditionally women used shawls. So in hot countries, people used shawls that were made of thin fabrics, and in hot countries they used thin fabrics, and in cold countries people use more woolen fabric. But traditionally women would have had shawls with them and used them for all sorts of things. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk about tonight. You feel free to, when you're watching this, normally the app here should give me some kind of beep and things, allow me to answer questions if you ask any. So I'm going to be talking about various things about the rebozo tonight. I'm going to be talking about a bit of history and background about it, and how it came to be used and what people use it for. I'm going to talk as well about why you want to use a shawl and a rebozo to support yourself. I'm going to talk about what are the advantages for parents and parent supporter of using a rebozo shawl, or any other shawl for that matter, and how you can use it in various ways, including, why is it so helpful. I'll give a bit of background on that, and I'll also explain how you can use it for yourself and to support yourself through, support your family, how you can use it for pregnancy support, and I'll be doing some demonstration about that. So if you have a rebozo handy or a pashmina scarf, if you don't have one, you might want to go, especially if you're pregnant or if you're basically interested to practice some of the techniques. Hey Zoe, if you want to practice some of the techniques, then bring some kind of cloth with you during this class, because you'll be able to try some of the stuff I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk about how you can use it for labor and birth support, and I'm going to talk about how you can use it for pregnancy support. Hi Siobhan. And baby calming and baby wearing, and also what can you use, if you don't have a rebozo. And at the end I'll just give you some links towards some further learning if you'd like to be able to learn more about how to use a rebozo. So, why do people, traditionally use a shawl like this? Well, first of all, any piece of fabric like this one would have been used as a garment. It would have been used to keep warm. It would have been used as part of your clothing. And then second of all, it would have also been used for carrying things. Beside carrying babies, women would have used a rebozo shawl to carry heavy loads, for instance, to carry, vegetables or wood or something like that. And then they would have therefore had that tool handy and naturally used it to support their bump during pregnancy and to support their hips during pregnancy. And then midwifery techniques were developed using the cloth as an extension of the arms to develop massage techniques and comfort measure for labor and birth, and techniques of, that help the ligaments relax and that help position the baby better for an easier and faster birth. Then, of course, women would have used the shawl for carrying babies and after the birth, and also, for postnatal support. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. So, like I said, this is a much more ubiquitous thing than what people, believe to be only a traditional Mexican tool. It's everywhere around each part of the world. It was part of our Western heritage as well. It's just that shawls have fallen out of fashion in the West, so women don't tend to carry shawls so much, so they've kind of lost the art of doing that. And because, like so many women traditional practices, it was only talked about, passed on from mother to daughters, not written about so much, and it gets lost, culturally gets lost very, very quickly. I found evidence of use of shawls for various things, for instance, in Europe, in particular in the UK, Poland and Holland. I know there is evidence of it being used for postpartum support, for binding the hips. I found evidence of it in, obviously, South America, not just Mexico, but places like Ecuador, Guatemala. They traditionally use things for pregnancy, birth and postpartum, as well as clothing and carrying. I found evidence of it in some African countries. So, for instance, in Somalia, Kenya, Ghana, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, they both use for pregnancy and postpartum support, and also as clothing and carrying tool. I found evidence of use of postpartum cloth in India, and also in Indonesia and in Hong Kong and in Japan. They use it for pregnancy support and postpartum support as well. So, why do you want to use a rebozo before I start doing some demonstration? It's because it's a very versatile tool. It's an accessory. It's something that's light and packable. You can pack it smaller than a packet of wipe. It's beautiful and colorful. And it's something that you can use, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute, to promote bonding and warmth and connection between you and anybody. It's the advantage of giving support without direct touch, which can be really handy sometimes. And it gives you more power and less effort when you want to use it to support someone, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. So it's empowering for a woman and a partner. If you can teach some of the techniques I'm going to talk about very easily to somebody who's going to be a woman's birth partner, and it's very empowering, because for the partner it makes them feel like they can really support the labouring women. For the labouring women, it makes her feel that she can. So it can be very, very helpful and supportive for that. And it's also a calming, soothing tool for the whole family. So, if you'd like to, I'm going to try and move into doing more practical demos and just yapping at you, but feel free to ask any question at any time, because the presentation here will be a lot more interesting and interactive if there's people who are asking questions rather than just me yapping about it. But I'm just going to show you some of the stuff you can do with a rebozo. So if you have a rebozo or a scarf or pashmina with you right now, this is the time to get it, because you will learn a lot more if you try what I'm showing you rather than just listening and watching me do it. So by putting the rebozo on your shoulders like this, you can use it to give yourself a shoulder massage. So we call that a self-care routine, because it's very, very easy to learn to use your tool for yourself. And if you learn to use this for yourself, you will have a lot better ability to use it for other people, because you will master it and know how it works and get familiar with it. So if you can really give yourself a bit of a upper back massage, and if you have very stiff muscles, and you wrap it like a bath towel like this, and rather than rubbing it, you make it into a tight little band, and then you can use it to just give yourself a bit of a upper back and shoulder massage. So you have to pull on it quite tight to do that. And when I've had stiff muscles sometimes whilst supporting someone through a birth, I found it absolutely invaluable to be able to massage my own shoulders like this. Or when you've sat at a computer for too long and you feel really stiff. It's not limited to the shoulders. You can also use it to give your lower abdomen, your back, a massage. You can use it to give yourself a bit of a bum massage that feels really nice. And you can also use it to give your feet, like this, a bit of a rub, and that feels really, really nice. So that's just some simple things you can do. And then, of course, there are lots of things you can do for pregnancy and birth, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But I want to explain what the main rebozo techniques fall into two categories. So I was trained in rebozo techniques via a Ecuadorian traditional shaman and midwife called Dr. Rocio Alarcon. And then I also trained with other people who are trained with traditional midwives. So I learned lots of different techniques, but because all these techniques were taught to us in a traditional way by people who usually made no reference to anatomical landmark, I felt slightly dissatisfied about that, because I was a scientist for 20 years before I became a doula and birth worker. And so I wanted to know what the various techniques did to the various joints and organs. And so I was lucky enough, in Cambridge I worked very close with an absolutely amazing osteopath called Teddy Brooks. And he and I practiced all the techniques together, so he was able to tell me what the various techniques do on the body and the nervous system and the various joints and organs. And some of the things I learned from that is the techniques fall into two main categories, really, when it comes to using a rebozo to support and comfort someone. They fall into wrapping techniques. So that would be a wrapping technique, wrapping your shoulders, but obviously it's a bit like trying to tickle yourself. If I wrap my own shoulders, that's not going to be very calming or grounding for me, because it's like trying to tickle myself. If somebody else wrap my shoulders, like in this picture here, then it's very, very grounding and calming for the person being wrapped. So it's something you can use on children too. So for instance, here you've got my daughter having the same kind of wrapping technique that's shown on that picture. But it can be done sitting or it can be done lying down. So wrapping techniques are very grounding because they bring you back in your body, and it's a very primal thing, very much like being swaddled. It reminds us of being in the womb because it gives limit to our body. Being wrapped, whether it's the shoulders, the hips, or any other part of the body, or all the parts of the body at once, being wrapped usually grounds people. It makes you breathe more in your abdomen, especially with the shoulder wrapping. And so it calms you, it makes you go back into your body as opposed to being too much into your head. Hello, Alison. Too much into your head is a disease of our society, and it's very, very calming to have somebody holding you in a cloth and reminding you of the existence of your body. The second set of techniques, because like I said, all the techniques fall into either wrapping or rocking. Rocking as itself, as you probably can imagine, especially if you've had babies, or if you have ever been in a hammock or in a nice rocking chair or in swing, rocking is very, very soothing for all ages. It's not just soothing for babies. And again, it's a very primal thing, the rocking. It brings you back into your body. It reminds you of being in the womb. And so most people find being rocked extremely calming and soothing. And I mean really any age. Babies obviously love it. But older children, toddlers love it. And older kids love it. I do it to my kids, and they're 8 and 11. Thank you, Alison. Alison saying hi there, loving to hear your wisdom. Thank you. So rocking, will benefit any age. It will benefit children, it will benefit teenagers, it will benefit adults, it will benefit birthing women, it will benefit any age or gender, it will benefit elderly, anybody can benefit from not just the rocking but the wrapping techniques as well. Both of those techniques, any rebozo techniques that involve wrapping or rocking feels very, very nice and soothing. And unfortunately, I can't rock myself by myself, so I'll show you some pictures and I'll talk about what rocking feels like. The wrapping, I'm going to be able to do some demonstration, but the rocking, if I kind of try to rock my own shoulders, it doesn't quite well. I can achieve some level of rocking, but it doesn't feel rocking like when somebody else, you have to have somebody else to rock you for you to feel all the benefits of being rocked. But I want to show you a couple of really useful wrapping techniques for pregnancy, and that is wrapping your hips and wrapping your bump. Now, wrapping your hips is not just reserved to pregnancy techniques, it's useful for any woman, and I really encourage you to try it. It feels really, really good to have your hips wrapped. And it feels very, I don't know, soothing. It's just difficult to describe, but I suggest you try it and see how you feel with your hip wrapped. I love wrapping my own hips, especially during my periods, for instance. But if you feel, if you try it and you see what it feels like, and then take the wrap off and see how different you feel, you'll understand what I mean by the fact that it feels very soothing and calming and comforting to have your hips wrapped. Shivan says, hip wrapping has changed my period experience. Oh, that's lovely to hear, Shivan. I'd love to hear more about how it has changed your period experience. Certainly, I feel that it's very comforting and soothing for me to do that. So I'm going to show you how to wrap your hips, and I suggest if you have a rebozo with you right now, or a pashmina of any kind, you can try what I'm doing right now. So it doesn't matter whether you're pregnant or not. But if you were pregnant, obviously you want to wrap under your bump. So if I pretend that this is my bump here, this cushion, then you'll see what it looks like when I'm not pregnant. So I'm just giving this disclaimer in case people just join us now, because in the past I've had people giving me congratulations after posting such videos. So what you want to do is you wrap your bottom with the cloth, okay, like this, and then you just tuck the edges under the bump. So if you're not pregnant, you can tuck slightly higher, but generally speaking, you want the fabric to twist and tuck exactly probably where your pubic bone is, and you want to give it some welly. You want to tighten quite a bit. It feels good to tighten quite a bit. In fact, one of the things that can really help tighten it is either have somebody else pull it for you, or doing what I'm doing now, which is a twist. Sorry for the weird bump. I'm going to get rid of it now just to do the rest of the demonstration. So do the twist here and then tuck the edges of the rebozo. And if you feel that's not tight enough, one really cool way to tighten it some more is to put a wooden spoon or a stick in, make a knot above the twist, and put a wooden spoon or a stick in the twist, so you can tighten it at will. And then once you've tightened it to your liking, you just tuck the edges of the rebozo in the top or the bottom or both. So there you got your nice hip wrap, which works for pregnant and non-pregnant women. Now, where the hip wrap's going to benefit pregnant women possibly more than non-pregnant women is where pregnant women can get very lax joints, because when we're pregnant we are full of this hormone called relaxin, which is fantastic and makes all our joints and ligaments and muscles, soft and flexible, so it's easier to give birth. But that means that some women can get hypermobility in the joints of their pelvis, and then therefore some of those joints can get locked, which creates a situation known as pelvic girdle pain. So that creates referral pain often in the front of the pelvis. Now, if you have such a condition during pregnancy, it's perfectly treatable, so do not let anybody tell you there's nothing you can do about it. It can't be helped because it's caused by hormone. It's not true, but the people who are able to treat it are usually outside the NHS, that is, osteopath or chiropractor are people who are skilled to release the stuck joint and therefore alleviate the condition. And the sooner you get treated in pregnancy when you have symptoms, the better the outcome. However, if you're not able to see somebody to treat you soon, or if you're in between appointments and you need, you need support for your hips because it's difficult to turn in bed, or your hips are really uncomfortable, or if you need to walk a lot and that kind of things, doing what I've just done now on my hips, that kind of, wrap, doing the hip wrap will really, really help support your hips. And usually for many women more comfortably than using a one of those physio belts that you can buy online. It's more adjustable and more adaptable to your body, and most people have a scarf or a pashmina in their cupboard that's strong enough for that. You don't have to go. If you're a birth geek like me, you might want to go and make sure you buy some original traditional shawl, but when not everybody cares about that, so you don't have to go and buy a special scarf to be able to wrap your hips. And then the second wrapping technique I want to show you for pregnant women. Hello Hannah, I'm pregnant with baby number 2 and really suffered with my hips in my last pregnancy so much that they induced me early. Where can I get one of these wraps? I'll put some links at the end. You don't have to have a special wrap, Hannah. If you use any strong enough scarf or pashmina that's not too slippery, that will work to wrap your hips. And some people have been known to use the belt of their dressing gown. You can be creative with all sorts of piece of the fabric that will do the job just fine. I'm sorry to hear you had PGP. I mean, I hope you get treatment, and feel free to post in the group to ask for referrals. And if people can recommend somebody to treat you in this pregnancy. So another thing that can feel really good, and by the way, I forgot to say, those treatments, the wrapping treatments, they are to be used mindfully, so you don't want to use them 24/7 all day long, because then they will stop your muscles and ligaments from doing their job. So it's a case of using them as a treatment when and how, as and when you need it, so that you're not stopping your body from doing its job. Do you see what I mean? It's like at the end of a long day, it feels good to put your feet up. That's the same kind of idea. So I'm going to put my fake bump back on to demonstrate bump wrapping. So bump wrapping, the same principle as hip wrapping, is you just use your scarf to wrap your bump when it feels heavy and uncomfortable. And again, something to be done mindfully, because you don't want to do it 24/7 every hour of the day. So if you just gather the cloth around the bump like this, you do what I've done around the hips in reverse. So you tighten the cloth around the back. Obviously, you're not going to tighten as much as you would do around the hips, because that would feel uncomfortable. And then you twist it and tuck it. So no using a wooden spoon here to tighten it. No, so it's just a case of giving the bump a little bit of scaffolding. But can you see how much support it gives, to do that? And if you have a longer wrap, if you have, for instance, a kind of wrap that you would use to carry a baby in, a really long ones, what you could do is, I'm going to show you with a slightly longer cloth, you could cross it around your back and tuck it under at the front, rather than tuck it in on the edge, and that will give you a bit more lift. Now, the lift might not feel so good, so like this, the lift might not feel so good if you've got reflux, so that's probably not, and then not a technique you'd want to use if you have severe reflux, okay? The other technique might feel better, but you go under the edge of the cloth and over, and the friction alone will block the fabric. So can you see I've crossed it on my back and just brought it to the front and tucked it under the edge. And I remember talking to a mum who said she was pregnant with twins, and she already had children, and the only way she felt she could cook dinner for her kids was wrapping her bump, because it felt so uncomfortable towards the end of her pregnancy that she needed that support to be able to, look after her family. Alison says that bump looks very convincing. Yes, I know, it's just a pillow with little, these little beads inside. And one of the first time I did, I've got videos of this on YouTube, by the way. If you've missed, you don't have to rewind this bit. I've got videos that show what I've just shown in a little bit more details on YouTube. I'll put some links at the end, underneath, in the comments, underneath the talk when it's finished. I once forgot to tell people this was a cushion, and so I posted this video and then got all these congratulations. I didn't know you were pregnant, so indeed it is very convincing. So that's for the wrapping in pregnancy. And then the wrapping I was showing you earlier, this wrapping of the shoulders, that like that, or like this on children, or lying down. It could be done on adults as well. It's difficult for me to demonstrate it on myself, but that type of wrapping, it's very, very calming and grounding. So it's not just useful to use in pregnancy, it's useful to use on any age when somebody needs calming and grounding. So my favorite way to use it on my children is when they come back from school upset, or they're tired, or they're grumpy and they're whingy. You know, in fact, now often when I say to my daughter, "What can I do to help you?" she said, "I want some rebozo." And I found it works very well on my husband too, when he came back from work having having had a really bad day, and he was ranting and ranting, and you get stuck in that loop of ranting. I wrapped him like this while he was sitting, and just he'd been ranting for ages, and he just went and stopped ranting, because it brings you back into your body as opposed to being really stuck in a loop of grumpiness. So try it. That wrapping the shoulders of your partner or your children. Rebecca Maria says, "I wish I had known about this when I was pregnant with my 2 10-pound babies. I would enjoy teaching this and showing to my client these tips. Can you recommend where best to get a rebozo type scarf? Sure that is the right size." I will put some links. I will put some links underneath in the comments underneath this talk about where to get some rebozos. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot available in the UK. I stock some. I import some from Mexico and from Ecuador, and also from Guatemala. There are some that you can find on Etsy otherwise, but they tend to mostly come from either the States or South America, so you have usually to pay quite heavy postage fees. So, like I said, at the end of the talk, I will list all the other pieces of cloth you can use. You don't have to really, if you want to get one for yourself, great, but you don't have to use that specifically to teach. I spent many years teaching antenatal classes for the NCT, and I always used pashminas. I got a whole bunch of pashminas in the car boot sale for £1 a pop, and I used to use that because I didn't want people to think they had to have something special that was difficult to find to use efficiently during labor. And so the right size depends a lot on your height. I'm 5'3", so if you're short like me, you usually get away with the standard size, which is about 1.8 meter is the standard size of most shawls, because they're traditionally just used to wrap the shoulders, to carry around your shoulders. But if you're significantly taller, then something like 2.5 meters, something between 2 to 3 meters would probably suit you better, because it'd be more versatile and allow you, for instance, to rock someone on the floor without having to bend forward a tremendous amount. If you're really tall, you would probably be better off having something that's 2.5 meters. And unfortunately, it's quite difficult to find pashminas that are 2.5 meters long. There aren't that many of them around. So I wanted to talk about stuff you can use for labor and birth. And unfortunately, that's something I'm going to show you some pictures, but I'm not going to be able to demonstrate, because I can't demonstrate it by myself. I need somebody else to be able to demonstrate it. But I can, if anybody wants to know, I can post some link towards examples of videos of that. There are a few on the internet. But some of the important things that you can do in pregnancy in preparation for labor is go sifting. And sifting is what you see on that picture there, which the woman is kneeling against the sofa, and the rebozo is wrapped around the bump, and the bump is gently rocked. That's called rebozo sifting. So what you want to do is wrap the rebozo around the bump, lift the weight of the bump off the spine, hold the rebozo like if you were holding the reins of a horse, okay, like this. And then you want to do little, sort of like you were riding a bike with your hand, little kind of cycling movement with your hand. It needs to be quite subtle. You don't want to go and jiggle the woman with great velocity. You want to do a gentle rocking movement. And what this does is it relaxes all the ligaments and muscle around the uterus. So usually pregnant women, especially the ones who are heavily pregnant, find it feels fantastic. For the partner, it gives them the chance to feel how heavy the bump is and give them a bit more sympathy. And lots of partners love it to be able to do that as well. and because it gives a chance to relax all your muscles and ligaments around the uterus, it also gives them a chance to rebalance themselves, which means the baby is more likely to be in a good position for labor. And it can also be used to alleviate all sorts of aches and pains during pregnancy. So it's a great technique, the rebozo shifting, to do on pregnant women. And then the other rocking techniques to do on pregnant women for relaxation purpose are rocking the hips on the floor like this. So you lie the person down. And I know that traditionally women are told not to lie down on their back whilst pregnant, but here, because you're applying movement whilst you're doing this, so you're doing a movement like this with your hand. Again, this needs to be quite gentle and guided by the woman, because there's no static position whilst lying on the back. It's usually okay for most women. And then another thing you can do is a rocking version, standing up of the hips, which is what I'm showing here. And it can help for the woman to be resting upper back against the wall. She doesn't feel too wobbly, and you can just apply some very, very, very gentle, again completely guided by the women, very, very gentle rocking. And both of these techniques, most women and men, actually, not just women, but here we're talking about pregnant women, find it incredibly relaxing and calming, and it feels good. It usually helps alleviate some aches and pains that you have during pregnancy, so it's all great. And then, so moving on to labor and birth support, there's almost too many techniques to list. You can use a rebozo to use for all sorts of stuff, ranging from, I don't know if you can see very well on that picture, but here the rebozo is attached to the top of the door frame. So all you need to do that is not make a big knot in a rebozo, chuck it on over the door, close the door. If you do that, you need to make sure that nobody's going to walk in whilst the woman is pulling onto the rebozo, but that it allows the woman to have a nice piece of fabric on which to pull and do a sort of semi-supported squat, which can feel great during labor. Some of you said, I wish I had known this when I was pregnant. I wish I had known this, because I spent both of my labors hanging onto my banisters, and it would have been much better to be hanging onto a piece of fabric than hanging onto the banisters. And then all the techniques that you use for pregnancy, labor and birth support, they're also going to fall into the wrapping or the rocking, and sometimes a mix of wrapping and rocking. But it can, if you've ever heard of a technique called a double hip squeeze, which is basically using a rebozo to wrap, typically you use your hand. So here I have a very big dolly, and the double hip squeeze traditionally is using your hand to squeeze around the hip of a woman during labor, because it helps to alleviate back pain. What you can do instead of that, because this technique is very demanding on the arms of the supporter, is you can wrap the rebozo as a little band around the hips of the woman in labor, and you just squeeze by pulling on the fabric when she needs her hip squeezed. And it's far less hard work than just pressing with your hands, and achieve the same results with a lot less demand on the body of the supporter. I was so grateful for this technique last year, because I supported a woman in labor, and I was a sole birth partner, and she needed me to squeeze her hips for 3 hours, and I could not have squeezed her hips for 3 hours during every contraction with just my hands, but with a rebozo it was just really easy and effortless, and I was just feeling so grateful whilst I was using this. Stephen's asking, what would you do with this in water? Do you mean like what would you do with a rebozo in water? Well, there's nothing you know, as long as you're not precious about your rebozo, which is why I like to have, quite a few with me. Usually in labor I take at least a couple. Because all sorts of stuff, bodily fluid, can get on them, but there's no reason why you couldn't use it to squeeze. Stephen's saying with the squeeze in water, there's no reason why you couldn't do the squeeze in water. And there's no reason why you couldn't do a version of this in water, by simply holding the rebozo on the edge of the pool for the women to pull on. There's a technique here, which is called the tug of war. I don't know if you can see, but basically the idea is the woman who's pushing is using the rebozo wrapped around the back of a supporter to have something to give her oomph to pull on. And you can do that in all sorts of positions, and I can't see why you couldn't do it in water. It gives the women pulling on something like a tug of war gives you more chance to engage your core, and I find it especially useful when a woman has an epidural and doesn't feel in which direction to pull, or a woman who's giving birth for the first time and feel like she's not making progress, or anybody who needs a bit of help. Pulling on something along with positioning can really, really help giving more power to pushing the baby. I supported a water birth. In fact, you're making me think about that, Siobhan. I supported a water birth last year, and the baby was asynclitic, so rather than coming down like this, it was coming with at a bit of an angle, and that meant the pushing took longer than expected. So what we did is I put the rebozo around my shoulders on the edge of the pool and stood on the edge of the pool. So I had wrapped it like this around me and gave that to the mum to pull on while she pushed, and that meant that the baby came a lot quicker. That really gave her more strength and avoided transfer to the hospital, because the time, the NHS tends to put time limit on how long a woman can push her baby without it being considering that an intervention is needed. So here it helped avoid an unnecessary intervention. Rebecca says, yes, great point about having something to pull against helping pushing. Yeah, it's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. The only thing I'm going to say to you that's very important is if you're standing at the edge of the bed or standing at the edge of the pool or at the edge of anything, usually I like to get a partner to do it, but anybody who's standing at the edge of wherever the woman is and giving them the rebozo to pull on, you need to brace yourself, because I nearly got pulled onto the bed by a woman because I wasn't ready. She had a contraction and she went and I nearly got pulled onto her. So you need to really push against the pool, push against the bed, and be ready for when she's having a contraction and she's pulling onto the fabric. And also be mindful about your own positioning, and so you don't hurt yourself. I talk from experience here. So there's like all the techniques you can use during labor, and there's too many to talk about right now, but there's hundreds of different techniques. They always fall into giving the woman support, giving the woman comfort. So the rocking, for instance, if a woman feels very tense and she's struggling to relax during the contraction, being rocked. It's impossible to stay tense whilst you're being jostled, so you can jostle the muscles of a labouring woman, and it helps with the comfort, and it helps to cope with the contraction better, and usually helps with labour progress, because when you're more floppy and loose and relaxed, you usually dilate faster and progress better. You can use the rebozo to help with positioning, so you can use it to help semi-squats or the pulling on the door that I showed earlier. And you can use it to provide more balance, and basically it's like an extension of your arms. There's tons of stuff you typically do with your arms that you can do more efficiently using a rebozo. So then we move on to postnatal support, and the techniques I've shown earlier, which is to wrap the hips, can be very, very helpful in postnatal support. Because when women have given birth, physically their hips are open, and there's like all this space that the baby used to be in, and they need to be helped to be, if you imagine my hands are the pelvis, they're very, very wide at the end of the pregnancy, and they need to be helped to go back to a position that is more similar to the one the woman had pre-pregnancy. And nature will take care of that eventually, but it might take a long time, and there might be a lot of discomfort and hip instability, and that sensation of being closed is very, very nurturing and helpful for women who have given birth. So I learned the technique called closing the bones from Dr. Rocio Alarcon, who's an Ecuadorian shaman and midwife. And in her country, traditionally in Ecuador, they used to do this technique at least 5 to 6 times during the first 40 days after the birth. They used to do a technique which is closing the bones, involve a rocking with the rebozo on the floor, a very extensive massage of the abdomen and hips, and then a closing of tightening the hips and the rest of the body using a rebozo or several rebozos. And what those techniques do is they help physically the hips go back to place and all the organs go back into place. They also help energetically of everything go back to where it should be, and also emotionally they help a woman feel whole again. They help a woman come back to herself. And it's quite fascinating for me to I learned these techniques in 2013 with Rocio, and then learned with her again since. But then it got me on some kind of quest to find out more about what other countries do. And I found that every single country in the world has some kind of binding. Sometimes it's just a binding, sometimes it's a binding and a massage, but the binding particularly seems to be completely ubiquitous, that we bind women after they give birth. We bind their hips, we bind their abdomens, we bind sometimes the hips and the abdomen. Some countries do just the hips, some countries do, for instance, some country may just bind the hips the way I showed earlier, which is just like this. And some countries may bind with a much longer closer. So some countries may just do this type of binding, okay? And some countries may bind the whole of the hip and abdomen like this, and then do a knot at the back. This one is a little bit too short for that. And then in Indonesia, they do a binding, those are bengkung belly binding, which is binding from the hips to the bottom of the ribs, the whole abdomen. And it's interesting to see, how different cultures do that. Do different techniques to support the women after they've given birth. But I find it fascinating. It's present in every single culture, because that shows that there's a lot of wisdom there, and that the fact that so many countries do it, is that something we're meant to be having, something we need to have after the birth. And I feel very much on a mission to make sure women get some kind of nurturing ritual or massage after they've given birth to their baby, because most countries, we used to have it too in the UK. We've just lost the way, so it's an important thing to reclaim. And so you can bind your hips, you can bind your abdomen, you can do what feels good, basically. And again, it's a case of being mindful and respecting your body and doing what feels like the right type of support for you. So, this is an example, for instance, of for instance, in Holland today, you can still buy a sort of girdle like this in, like, the Dutch equivalent to mother care. And then this is what belly binding, the bengkung looks like, binding from the hips to the bottom of the ribs. And this is Somalian traditional binding, which bind the abdomens. So when it comes to babies, after the birth, you can use the rebozo the same way you use a swaddling cloth. So you can wrap the baby with it, and it feels very comforting. You can gently rock the baby on the floor using the rebozo. And then, of course, you can carry your baby, and in keeping with the spirit of talking about, tradition all around the world, people often don't realize that using a shawl, which is here a Welsh shawl and here a Scottish plaid, were used as part of the UK as well. Charlotte asked, how would it work for a mum with a cesarean? That's a very good question. The answer, as for many things, is always be guided by the woman. In my experience, some women after cesarean love the sensation of something supporting their scar, so they might be ready to have, they might like the sensation of being bound very soon, after the birth. And some women cannot tolerate anything touching their scar for days or weeks or even months. So, of course, it's not as simple, do this, do that answer. It's a case of do what feels good, try it. If it feels good, do it. And if it doesn't, then don't do it. And so then you can, of course, use a rebozo like this to carry a baby after the birth. So it's a very, very versatile tool. And so I want to say that you can use many other things than a traditional rebozo. You can use, baby wearing wraps, both the woven and stretchy variety to wrap and rock yourself, and wrap and rock other people. Obviously, you can't really rock yourself. And you can use scarves as long as they're not too thin or fragile. You can use pashminas, you can use blankets, you can use sarongs, you can even use towels and bedding and more. So I'm going to sort of come toward the end of this course now, the end of this class, but I want to say that if you want to learn more, I'll put a link toward my website in the comments under this talk, but if you want to learn more, you can go and visit my website, which is www.sophiemessager.com, and I have several things that are available for people who want to learn more about rebozos, ranging from I have made the course that I teach, the rebozo course that I teach for birth worker. I've made it available in an ebook, which is available to download for £25 on my website. It's a 30-page handout that's got about 30 different techniques for both pregnancy, birth, and postnatal, pretty much everything I've talked about today. And each of the techniques is accompanied with a picture, a description, what the technique does in terms of various joints and organs, and a link towards a private tutorial video, so you don't have to worry about remembering and knowing how to do things. You can just basically teach yourself. And I also run group rebozo and closing the bone workshop in Cambridge and up and down the country, and again those are listed on my website. And I'm in the process of creating a rebozo e-course, an online course, and if that's something you'd be interested to learn more about, private message me or write a comment under this class, because I will be offering to early adopter. I will be, Shivan is saying, birth workers, do the course workshop in person, is brilliant, thank you. Yeah, we'll be offering the opportunity for people who want to adopt my course before it's released so they can give me feedback. I will be offering an interesting incentive process. So that's it for today, and thank you very much for listening. And if you have any more questions, feel free to post them in the comments under this video. Thanks, bye-bye.